In some ways, Henrietta Rodman was like Haley. She was a pain in the ass to the local school district. She was involved in a lot of things, and she also echoed the concern that the school system looked too closely like the factory system. I didn't really, in this paper, interrogate, as you did so nicely, sort of the shortcomings of Rodman. Unfortunately, I don't think she lived as long as I would have liked to have seen her live. She was a flame that burned too brightly and went out too quickly. But I don't want to over-romanticize her either. Henrietta Rodman was a high school English teacher. She was also a founding member of Local 5, the New York City chapter of the American Federation in 1916, American Federation of Teachers. She had been active in its predecessor organization, the Teachers League 1913, and remained involved in the union leadership until her death. Rodman had always been a controversial teacher. She found the public school rigid and insensitive to the needs of students, and worked consciously outside the barriers and boundaries of the prescribed curriculum. She was regularly reprimanded for her unusual teaching methods, which she actively engaged students at her all-girl public high school in leading feminist-oriented investigations of contemporary social problems. It was only after she gained positive media attention for her classroom work and her teaching philosophy that administrators grudgingly allowed her some leeway. She also worked outside the public school system, training teachers for the socialist Sunday schools, serving as a founding board member of the anarchist Ferrer School, teaching immigrants in the evening schools, and lecturing widely on topics of socialism, feminism, and school reform. She opposed World War I and worked hard but unsuccessfully to defeat the state military, compulsory military high school training for boys. A participant in the birth control movement, she advocated for the inclusion of sex education in the school curriculum. She had been involved in earlier teacher organizations preceding the establishment of the AFT, including the Interborough Association of Women Teachers, which successfully campaigned for equal pay for equal pay for women teachers. As a socialist and a unionist, she had a pretty good understanding of the plight of working-class women, many of whom were represented in her classroom at Walleye High School. She became involved in labor union advocacy as a member of the Women's Trade Union League, through which she led teachers to raise funds in support of the shirtwaist workers' strike in 1910. She was also intimately engaged in the 1913 Paterson, New Jersey silk workers' strike, in which some 24,000 workers went out over a 7-month period. Rodman became a good friend of strike leader Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, who was arrested for speaking out on behalf of the workers. And she organized the 1915 demonstration around Flynn's right to free speech and spoke frequently at fundraising rallies in her defense. In 1920, Rodman was chosen the chair of the Women's Labor Party, and these activities only begin to scratch the surface of her involvements. Rodman lived out her philosophies in ways that few women of her era could even conceive. A daughter of the late Victorian age, she spent her adulthood helping to shape the progressive era through organizations like the Bohemian Liberal Club, to which Leo referred earlier, Heterodoxy, which was a feminist consciousness-raising group in New York City, the League for the Civic Service of Women, which sought equal treatment of women in city jobs, the Feminist Alliance, which pursued a constitutional amendment guaranteeing equal rights to women in all facets of the law, and which also attempted to build a feminist apartment house for working mothers. A founding member of the Friends of India, she promoted an independent India. She and her husband, along with a number of other couples, founded the New York Civic Club, the first organization of its type in the city to admit both male and female, black and white members on an equal basis, one of whom was W.E.B. Du Bois. At her Greenwich Village apartment, Rodman introduced Margaret Sanger to the New York City feminist community and opened doors to funding and support Sanger had not previously imagined possible. During World War I and the subsequent Red Scare, she refused to sign the teacher loyalty oath and railed against the impact of super patriots on the narrowing curriculum, pedagogical methods, and free speech of teachers and students. Union work was a family affair, as her husband, Herman DeFemery, an instructor in neurology at Columbia University, was a founding member and president of the Associated Teachers Union, Local 71 of the AFT. Rodman was a member of the prominent Blackwell and Rodman families, whose New England roots extended back before the Revolutionary War. Her mother's side can be traced back to 1637, when the land in the New York East River, now known as the Roosevelt Island, was inherited by her ancestor. It became known as Blackwell Island. Later, her ancestor, Colonel Blackwell, became a member of the Second Continental Congress. Her father's ancestor, exiled from Ireland for his Quaker beliefs in 1655, was banished to Barbados, and his son settled later in Rhode Island in the following decade. Her father, Washington Rodman, a minister, was once mobbed for his abolitionist convictions. He was a graduate of Columbia University and the General Theological Seminary, a pastor for Grace Church for 25 years, and also founded the first hospital in the United States for chronic illness, an institution that's still in operation today. Henrietta very consciously followed in her ancestors and her father's footsteps as a visionary who displayed moral courage in the face of doubt and antagonism. She grew up in the old Blackwell mansion with her parents, her stepsister, and two brothers. She graduated from the nearby State School of Normal School of Jamaica on Long Island in 1900. That same year, she began teaching at the local primary school before she advanced to teach at Walleye High School in Manhattan upon completing her bachelor's degree at Teachers College in 1903. When biology teacher, high school teacher Henry Linville and his colleague Abraham Lefkowitz started the Teachers League in 1913, Rodman had already begun her campaign for the right of women teachers to marry and gain maternity leave. A practiced manipulator of the press, Rodman gained positive media attention for what quickly became known as the rights of teacher mothers. She coalesced numerous organizations to pressure the high school. She coalesced numerous organizations to pressure the school board through mass meetings, letter writing campaigns to elected officials, and well-attended public debates. And they were well-attended and very well covered in the newspapers. After her own secret marriage was revealed in the press in 1913, the board chose not to fire her, but by late 1914 they had enough of her in the teacher mother issue. Following the publication of an unflattering but satirical evaluation of the school board's treatment of teacher mothers in the New York Times humor column, they took the opportunity, charging her with gross misconduct and insubordination, and suspended her for 1 year. Rodman lashed out at the board members. She says, "You have placed personal loyalty to yourselves above the love of justice. It's your duty to the community to employ teachers who will develop in their pupils a love and respect for American ideals of liberty and justice. Whether I'm returned as a teacher or dismissed, I shall work for the new reorganization of the public schools upon a basis of greater democracy. The conflict between the highest ideals of American citizenship and the ideals of the board must be ended." Rodman's case galvanized the teachers' union. Linville admitted that the union had begun with a primary interest in gaining teachers a fair return for their services. But Rodman's situation had compelled members to think more deeply about their professional standing and the importance of free speech in delivering the task for which they were hired. Moving forward over the next decade, the union would center much of its activity on defending teachers' right to free speech. Rodman was down, but she was not out. Union members took up an $1,800 collection amounting to her year's suspended salary, which Rodman refused and suggested to be used as a legal fund for teachers. She assured her supporters that the New York Tribune had already extended an offer for her to be the educational columnist during her suspension. The position was heaven sent, affording her not only a chance to support her children, but to daily evaluate the shortcomings of New York public schools, which she did with a vengeance. But the job was not just a bully pulpit for Rodman. She also exposed her readers to new educational experiments and interviewed cutting-edge educational activists and thinkers. When she returned to teaching in the fall of 1915, Rodman faced a new crisis as the United States edged towards official participation in the war. War and its accompanying xenophobia and mistrust of the leftist agenda further decentered the Union's agenda of gaining a more powerful voice for teachers in running the school system. It and the subsequent Red Scare resulted in a contracting of the educational social justice projects, as well as surveillance, arrest, and even deportation of some of Rodman's friends and acquaintances, including Emma Goldman. Rodman's persistence in socialist, unionist, anti-war, free speech activities, including her refusal to sign the teacher loyalty oath, made her persona non grata among many educators. But the Union was steadfast in its support of her as she was to it. Through the Civic Club, she organized public debates against the New York State Lust laws, which supported the expulsion of teachers who were deemed less than 100% American, and managed a statewide campaign which engaged a broad coalition of working-class unions in an effort to eliminate the Lust laws. In 1920, the state's Committee on Teacher Qualifications demanded that she appear before them, given all the stuff that she had been doing, to determine whether she should retain her teaching credentials. Sensing a witch hunt, she simply refused. To the press, she explained, "The best teachers are leaving the profession because they have creative minds that don't fit into the factory system which the Board of Regents have forced upon them. The present tendency is to render the intellect sterile. We are not permitted to bring in any subject of a controversial nature in the classroom. This means students are not permitted to reason and attempt to understand the problems which they may help solve." Despite the elimination of the Lust laws in April 1922, Rodman and other teachers under similar charges, they were teaching, but they received no salary for their work. The union demanded the state pay the wages, but the officials refused to even discuss it. Unfortunately, Rodman did not live to see the resolution of her case against the state. She had a stroke and died a few months later of a brain tumor in 1923 at age 45. The teachers' union held a memorial service for her and made unsuccessful efforts to have a school named after her as well. Yet her work, I think, reminds us of the power of the individual in connecting with an organization on a common cause. Thank you.